right. Let's get you going. Here is that. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, everyone. Before we get started, I would just like to say a couple of things. The first thing is, my mother was a Tennessee teacher for 40 years. I did in my undergraduate degree, I did a minor in education. I was a student teacher and then finished out the year of a teacher who got sick at what used to be Central Middle School, right in the heart of Murfreesboro, Tennessee. I've had, through my almost 40 years of teaching at MTSU, many students to go into teaching at the high school level, the community college level, the college level. I think Tennessee educators are super. I have always been, my mother was a tremendous model for me for her commitment to her profession. I can remember, summers she would be doing just like you guys, going to workshops, taking courses at MTSU. She took a course one time at Peabody when, it was easier to drive from Murfreesboro to Peabody. No one today would want to do that. God, it'd take you 2 hours each day just to get there. But, she was so dedicated to always staying up in the profession. And then she was so committed to her students. And that was something that I still will encounter people who say, aren't you Sarah West's son? I had her for, whatever year, and what an influence she had. So I really am proud to be the son of a Tennessee teacher. I'm proud of what Tennessee educators do for our state. And I think that needs to be said loud and clear in today's times. And I'm proud of my students who are here today. So I have to ask for a bit of an editorial leeway here to try to introduce all of them to you. I know there's, starting back at the back of the exhibit table, there's Jessica Reeves, who is here from Metro Historical Commission, from Tennessee State Parks. There's just a flurry of people. There is Hobart Aiken, who is standing there in the back. Bobby Cooley is standing over here in another corner. David Britton bent my ear for a good 10 minutes this morning. Jedediah, I know you were here at some point. You might still be out in the hallway. And then I moved up to my own 2 students who are at the Center for Historic Preservation, Abby and October. And October, I want to particularly give a shout out. She just defended her master's thesis. It's a great piece of Tennessee history research. And she's going on for her PhD at the University of Illinois. Sorry, she's not staying here, but that's great. And then there were the guys who are here with the State Library and Archives. Kelly Wilkerson and I, we do go back a few years. She was with the Tennessee Historical Society for many years. Maybe some of you remember her and her education work there. And Nikki's doing a great job in that role, as Jennifer Core did before them at the Tennessee Historical Society. But there's Nikki, there's the 2 Caseys, Casey Swink with State Parks, Casey Jimrick with State Library and Archives. And who else am I forgetting? If I am, I apologize. There are my blessings. These students who have come into MTSU have worked extremely hard to then take what they know out to communities across Tennessee. I couldn't be more proud of what these guys are doing. And again, particularly for the State Library and Archives guys, I'm particularly glad that they have a building to do these types of things in. So it's just great being here this morning with this wonderful facility, which was a dream for many years. And again, in Tennessee, we do believe in our history. That's one of the big messages I want you to take away today. No matter what happens, we do know that Tennessee history really does matter. And if you just think for a moment, in just the last 10 years, we have invested in both a new state museum, a new state library and archives, the whole Bicentennial Mall State Park, which the superintendent is yet another student of mine, Jerry Wooten. All of this has been an investment that gives not only visitors a chance to learn more about our state, but it gives us a place. And I always say we're in a new platform of teaching state history, and I'm really looking forward to the next several years. So with all that said, let me go into a little bit about what the 250th appears to be. I am right now the chair of the Tennessee Commission for the Semi-Quincentennial of the United States. Now, this is a rotating position. I won't be the chair in 2026, but I was the one who was sort of tasked with help us get organized and get started. So that's what I've been doing over the past year and a half. And the big thing, I think, is our mission statement. This was something that the different members of the commission sat down and really thought about and talked about. And what you'll see right in the middle of that is very much, it's an educational commemoration. We do want to have a good celebration in 2026. You know, all together we have built a great nation. But we also want to use the fact that people have, you know, people focus on anniversaries. Well, let's use that as a teaching moment to teach people more about what Tennessee has contributed to our nation. Now, the members of the commission were set by the legislation that created it through the Tennessee General Assembly. So you can see that this is a slide that I've used in the past. Of course, we know that Chuck Sherrill, who was a very important member of this committee as the state librarian for many years, has retired. And Jamie Ritter will be coming in later this summer to take his place, and he'll be a member of the Tennessee Commission. But, you know, we're representing different parts of the state. We have members of the state legislature. We have the two sort of leading Revolutionary period heritage groups, and the Daughters of the American Revolution and the Sons of the Revolution. And then you have a lot of the same people who are involved with the Discover Tennessee initiative, also involved with this as well. So I think it's a well-rounded group. We were given certain responsibilities, and these are the two most important. One is, as you can probably guess by the sort of tortured legislative wording, infrastructural improvements. That's for heritage tourism. Now, this is where we did learn from the semi-quincentennial of the Civil War, which I was the chair of. And that was where Tennessee really put together, through a lot of planning, a lot of community events, we put together what everyone recognized later as the best state commemoration of the Civil War period. Well, we want to do something here, and we want to make sure that we get visitors into the state to learn our story. So that's a big part of what the state is interested in. But then that second part, I think, is really where the commission has been focused right now. And that is to commemorate the 250th anniversary of highlighting role of Tennessee and Tennesseans in the events and in the event succeeding the historical event. So this is what I really set out to do in this past year and a half, is to go to a lot of different conferences, a lot of different events. And then I even did a state roadshow in December of last year, when COVID finally sort of broke, and, you know, I knew people would get out and no one would complain that I was doing this at that time of the year. And I always will remember someone saying at the Nashville meeting, wait a second, I saw on Facebook you were in Kingsport yesterday. Yeah, I was in Kingsport yesterday. I'm in Nashville today, and I'm in Memphis tonight. So, you know, I mean, traveling Tennessee can be fun. It can also be challenging. And that's a really important part, I think, of getting out there and talking with people. I'm not saying we're done with that. To me, these meetings that we did in December were really just the beginning. But we did start at the boatyard, which in Kingsport, which is a very important event, a very important place. And of course, it's where the East Tennesseans decided, hey, we're coming over to Middle Tennessee and start Nashville in 1780. That's a very important period of our history. But then I ended up at the National Civil Rights Museum in Memphis, Tennessee, almost 200 years later, another very important chapter in our history. So having those meetings, getting people's feelings and ideas and suggestions were crucial to what we wanted to do. Because the legislature had also given us the charge, hey guys, tell us what your plan is. Have a plan. Tell us what needs to be done. And I wanted to get a lot of input on that. But as I've told groups, I'm not stopping. Today is a similar type of event. I talked to State DAR in April in Franklin. I am speaking in Memphis to a whole group of people. They keep on deciding how many different groups they want to have involved. And my thing is, hey, I'm coming to Memphis. I don't care how many you have. And that's on October the 8th. So we're still looking for ideas and input. But this is what we have right now. We have a set of recommendations that we shared with the governor, and then we also shared with members of the General Assembly. And of course, we have 4 members of the General Assembly on the commission. The first thing is people want a statewide focus. I know at first there was a lot of comments that, well, Tennessee at the time of the Revolution was really East Tennessee. We were part of North Carolina, or we were Cherokee territory, and there's a limited story. Well, if you look at the Revolutionary period in a broad sense, though, the role of the frontier really came into focus in the 1780s. So we see our event as really continuing a lot of attention to Tennessee's revolutionary period past 2026. Even as far as 2033 and the Treaty of Paris that finally ended the event, because by that time you already had that first generation of Revolutionary War veterans from Virginia and North Carolina moving into Tennessee and moving not just into East Tennessee, but starting their way into Middle Tennessee. And of course, then there was the question of West Tennessee, because that was Indian territory, and there's really the settlement story there starts more like 1819, 1820. But this is where at the Kingsport meeting, I was so pleased. People there in Kingsport emphasized, hey, we need to have the theme of Tennesseans March for Democracy, that moving across the state is a big story. And we just don't focus on what happens during the Revolutionary War period, but how Tennesseans have contributed to our growth of democracy and democratic values over the decades. And then that became a theme I heard everywhere. Everyone is like, let's don't just focus on a short time period. Certainly we want to give that a lot of attention, but let's talk about what the Declaration of Independence means and what it has meant for Tennesseans over time. So that will be, I think, a big thrust of everything that goes on, because that's what I'm hearing from Tennesseans and communities on what they want to do. Now, sort of tied into that was, man, do people love interpretive markers here? We want a trail. And I don't know if any of you have been out on the Civil War trail that was created during the 150th, but this was something I heard in all meetings. Hey, we need to have something similar to this, about how the Revolutionary War veterans not only came to Tennessee, but how they filtered across the state. And of course, you've got places, a lot of counties in West Tennessee are named for Revolutionary War veterans. And then there's important sort of march towards democracy events. Now, I think much like the Civil War trail, that will be something that you do want to focus on local history. You don't need to tell national history, let's say on the Dyersburg Square. You want to talk about how local events tie into your national story. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this develops. We have already met with some of the surrounding states. I had a very good meeting with Virginia, North Carolina, and South Carolina, and Georgia about something that would be a sort of regional trail system as well, that Tennessee could plug into a southern region. And the folks that did the Civil War trail markers were part of that, and that company is willing to be involved with this too. So, much more to come on this. That's not happening in the next few months, but it is one of the points that people want to hear more about. Okay, another thing people want is a grants program. I don't know if you realize that the old state museum that just got replaced, that was really the sort of bicentennial project of the state. And a lot of people that were involved in the Tennessee Bicentennial Commission then became the officers and leaders of the expanded and new state museum building. Well, that is a memory that people still have, and they want to have that grants program. The kicker is the federal government back in the mid-1970s put a lot of money into the bicentennial. Not so sure that's happening this year. There is an America 250th Commission that's been created, but exactly what they're doing, I'm trying to stay involved and stay knowledgeable. I don't think they quite know yet. Congress certainly doesn't know what it's doing, at least as far as this goes. And, we'll have to see. And this is where, if the state wants to have a grant program, I think the state needs to develop it. And we have already recommended that to the legislature and to the governor. The big thing that people emphasized was educational programming. So this is what we have decided to push to the legislature and to the governor's office, that teachers need programming, workshops, materials of all sorts. And it's some of this are traditional things that the institutions that are involved with setting up Discover Tennessee, they're already doing. Lesson activities, lesson plans, traveling trunks, websites, all of those ways tied into the social studies standards. I was really pleased with how many educators went to these public meetings and emphasized these points. We need on-ground workshops, not just here in Nashville, but workshops out in the different grand regions of the state to make sure that teachers can be reached and in such a way that is better for them. Now, they are thinking of signature events, big events that can include reenactments, speakers, music, cultural types of events. And we did some of those during the Civil War sesquicentennial. And probably some of you attended those. I know the last one was in Knoxville in 2016 to emphasize the war to reconstruction theme. And they had the signature event at the old Bijou Theater in downtown Knoxville, and then at the convention center. Chattanooga used the convention center. So these were big events that state tourism really promoted and organized because they're great at that stuff. So yeah, I see that as being something too, because that reaches groups of people, adults, families, groups that you want to have. In Memphis, they have discussed having Liberty Forums that could be broad-based in theme and content across the state. And this meeting I'm doing in Memphis on October 8th is to hear a little bit more on what they're thinking of and what they're doing. And this is really a sort of initiative coming out of the Sons of American Revolution as part of their overall national programming, that we have different events across the state, not just in one place. So I think the education push is important, and particularly what they want to do with a website. Now, this is where it's it's only a few years between the Civil War anniversary and this one, but it's a sort of world of difference in technology. And I think there will be quite a bit of emphasis on social media tools and with a really robust website. I think some of you will remember the Civil War website had content and event promotion and teacher materials. But we see this as being really geared more to teaching materials and would be heavily marketed. That the website and different apps, I know that's been discussion, those will be important to do. And I think as that planning starts up, there's really been nothing done so far, except the state did go and reserve the web name at Tennessee250.org to make sure someone else didn't claim it, and that would be easy for people to use. You know, that's what's been done so far. I really want to have a lot of educator input on this. I think that was lacking in the Civil War one. I want that to be stronger because you guys know better what students are doing with smartphones and websites, and we'll have a much better take than any of the rest of us will. So again, I see that as an important area for education. And hopefully then what I really want to see is that website to be made permanent, that it can be lodged with an institution, be it State Library and Archives, be it the State Historical Society, be it MTSU, be it UT, I don't, care. It needs to be lodged and kept up because that could be a really important way for Tennesseans to connect to these big themes that come out of the Declaration of Independence, because they are just fundamental themes and ideas in our nation. So we don't want to just celebrate it and forget it. We want to sort of keep that material in front of people so they can use it. So what are some of the key events that we're focusing on? Well, this is sort of the key, the start. I'm not saying this is the only thing that you can expect big events about whatsoever, but we had to start somewhere. So we looked at sort of key events in state history. The Treaty of Sycamore Shoals in March of 1775. I know that state parks and the folks up at Sycamore Shoals, they're already planning and talking about what they want to do in the spring of 2025. The Declaration of Independence, of course, is July 4th, 2026. That'll be a huge celebration. But then for Tennesseans, the very next day was the Watauga Association petition to Virginia. And that's a very important event within our state's history. I don't know how we sort of plan that so it doesn't get just overwhelmed by the national celebration, but we'll figure it out. And then you have the sort of what happens in July of 1777, the Treaty of Long Island. You have Donaldson leaving Fort Patrick Henry for Nashville in December 2029. The creation of Nashville, the signing of the Cumberland Compact, that would be the spring of 2030. The Over Mountain Men gather at Sycamore Shoals, that's September of 2030. And of course, they do that event every year, sort of commemorating the Over Mountain Men at Sycamore Shoals. This year's event is on September the 8th. It's always a great event to go to. And then in July of 2031, the Treaty of Long Island. So again, there's Tennesseans and groups that are talking to the commission. They already have some events that they know they want to hit, and I think there'll be more. I think we can have a really robust program. And already some work has started. Tennessee DAR started the commemoration in September with the unveiling of the first of what they plan to do, 3 markers in all 3 grand divisions about the 250th at Sycamore Shoals. As you can see, there we are on the banks of the Watauga River. And it was a really cool event because, you know, the ladies of the DAR wear those cool hats. You know, my little pitiful hat just can't compare with them. And they all had those cool hats. They had reenactors of different types, and it was really a great event. And I think we'll see much more of that. I'm really pleased that Tennessee is already sort of underway. Now, I did want to close with some comments about the national group and what they're doing. The American 250th Foundation is, you know, covering the nation and the territory. So they have a big job in front of them. And as you can see, they have already divided themselves into 6 divisions or teams. This is a slide I took from a PowerPoint they did online a couple of months ago. You know, federal and international partnerships. Okay, that's great. State partnerships, that's interesting. You know, yesterday I had an inquiry from 250. Well, what are you doing in Tennessee? And I just sent them our report that we gave the governor, that we're up to things. And I'm speaking here today in Nashville on this. And they came back and said, wow, Tennessee's already underway. Yep, pay attention. Tribal partnerships, I know here that will be very important to see their involvement of the Cherokee Nation and the Creeks and the Shawnees, all of whom have important parts in early Tennessee history. They say public outreach and inclusion and engagement. Exactly where they're going with that and what that will involve, I don't know. They have talked to Tennessee about an initial grant of $10,000. Now, you know, that's not much money, but in Tennessee, we can take any money and make it go. So I'll be glad to see them starting some money that can help us probably with the development of the website. And then they plan to have national signature programs as well. So in listening to their different meetings, this is sort of my feeling on what will happen at the national level. That program will be on their big events. Because the one thing they keep on talking about, when the ships, the big tall ships sailed into the East Coast ports. Well, you know, that was great, but, you know, it really, you know, they're not selling into Tennessee. But, you know, they're focused on that. They're thinking about calling a convention of the states to Independence Hall in Philadelphia to sort of recreate the Declaration of Independence vibe. You know, those all sound great. I don't see it having much direct impact on us. I do like the fact that they really don't have a template yet. I haven't heard that, hey, this is what you have to do. I'm not hearing that at all. I do see that they understand that some places will want to do commemorative and educational. Some will do, you know, just have a big party. And then some will have the reflective thing. Okay, what does the Declaration mean today? What does that mean to us today? And a much more contemporary event feel to their programming. They seem to be open to that. And as I say in that sort of middle bullet point, the real action will be left to the state commissions. They do have a serious interest in educational programming. And I think the good thing for us is one of their members of their educational team is also a member of the Teaching with Primary Sources Network, which we're a part of with the Library of Congress. So I think good, there's one area we can have some input in. And they are setting up this advisory council for history education. At this point, there are no Tennesseans on the advisory council for history education. Don't know if that changes, but then go back to that middle bullet point. The real action will happen at the state level. Because again, I heard all of this back during the Civil War sesquicentennial. Hey, you know, we're going to have a national bill. We're going to do this and we're going to do that. And the best advice I ever got was in 2010 from the superintendent of Fort Sumter, where I was up there doing a workshop at their invitation. And this superintendent said, hey, I want to take the boat ride with you over to the fort, and we're going by ourselves. So I didn't know if he wanted to dump me over the side or what. But then he said, hey, I've been watching what you're doing in Tennessee. Keep on doing it because they're talking about national funding. It will never happen. So keep on doing what you're doing. Well, you know, he was absolutely right. So we can't wait for the national government to work. We have to make sure we've got a good plan and moving forward in Tennessee. So in closing, and I know this is not one of my more exciting addresses that I've ever given to a group of educators, but you know, I wanted to just catch everyone up with what's going on and what's being discussed. Because yeah, this event is still several years away, but you know, 2025, 2026 will be here sooner than we think. So I want to again get information out there, get input out there, and make sure our state can take advantage of it. I do think there will be significant challenges because, you know, the Revolutionary War period, well, it's a revolution, so it's always been controversial. When it happened, after it happened, and even today, what that all means will always be a source of controversy for some. But I think for those of us who want to teach Tennessee history and U.S. history, it's also a thing of great opportunities. And it will involve all types of people. So I sort of put together a final slide here that had two young men who were reenactors playing at that DAR event there on the very place of the Over Mountain Men back in September. They're the top thing. Over on the left side is a project that we have just gotten involved in over in Dyersburg at Bruce High School, where they want to put together a heritage room. And that's a picture of Uncle Sam there, was surrounded by members of the band back when they were doing an event at that school in the 1950s. So again, commemorating and celebrating the revolution has always been a big part of our history. And then there on the right, I have to highlight two of my own graduate students who are now professors, and they have created the Black Craftspeople Digital Archive, which will have a focus on Tennessee about African Americans who were craftspeople, who made things, and where those things are. And of course, you know where a lot of those things are. They're here at the State Museum or here at the State Library and Archives. So, you know, you got that new generation. That's Torrin Gaston on the left and Tiffany Moman in the right. Torrin's at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro. Tiffany's at the University of the South at Swanee, Tennessee. And, you know, they're putting together these new tools that their old professor doesn't know one thing how to do or what they can mean, but I know this is how we teach. We have to reach people with our information. And as long as we have it centered in our primary sources and in the places, the things, and the stories of Tennesseans, we will have a grand semi-quincentennial here in Tennessee. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. West. All right, educators. I know you all always have great questions and comments. So what questions do you have for Dr. West or suggestions about what we might pursue with the 250th? Yes.
You mentioned maybe a lasting permanent website and perhaps app or some form of development reuse. Would that be something that would be obviously Tennessee specific or something that you would also try to find as a form of the national version?
Well, we'll have to see what the national group does. But I would really want it to be more Tennessee specific for teaching Tennessee history, both at the, you know, elementary school level, but also at the collegiate level. And I don't see how you could escape some of the national themes that would be involved. But I think whatever we do needs to be tied to our social studies standards primarily, because then that means it's a friendly to Tennessee students and Tennessee educators. But again, we're just talking about this, how that might shake out. I can't say for sure.
Something recently, I was at the Cahokia UNESCO World Heritage Site in Illinois. part of my city, Mississippi culture. And, with that site currently being closed, because even the Kirkwood Center is closed while they're incorporating us for welfare. They have an app, with AR features. You walk in, you got your phone, you shoot a QR code, and then you can see all the things that are happening, in that virtual space overlaid with reality that you're looking at. Something like that would be very, very, I don't want to say simple to do anymore, but it's definitely within our time horizons between now and then. Is that something you guys are discussing, things that?
Yeah,
Could I can go on the site,
Yeah.
see things that.
Fort Nashville, here in Nashville, has been dismantled. But you could do a virtual tour of what that fort was like, same with Sycamore, Shoals, same with several other sites across the state. We actually are at the center doing more with Cherokee Nation on some of this right now, as we work through different sort of issues they have with the Cherokee removal and the Cherokee villages. And one of my PhD students just recently did a whole big study, and her whole dissertation is about red clay. And that's one area that everyone's thinking, man, having something there that really sort of would recreate what red clay was would be pretty important. So yeah, I think, again, the guys who are really good at this, they're thinking in those directions.
And Dr. West mentioned the social city standards. You all, I'm sure, know that they are currently taking comments, like public feedback, on those standards. The social city standards for Tennessee through Monday, I think. The deadline is Monday, so I certainly encourage you to take a look at that website and respond. I've spent some time on it. I've made a couple of suggestions on things, so encourage you to do that.
You had a question. Well, that's what I was, during the last adoption, in 8th grade, most of the history standards were missing.
Right.
So, students who receive this information in 4th and 5th grade, a few years ago, the state also took out our Tennessee geography. We had a geography course we taught in the 7th grade.